Shadows Within Our Home, a chilling tale that delves into the darkness of mental illness, family dynamics, and the blurred line between reality and perception. Follow the story of Samantha's possession and the sinister occurrences that plague her family. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling content. Chapter 1: The First Signs. Lily Smith was used to her older sister Samantha being moody, but something was different now. Samantha had always been a bit rebellious, but lately, she seemed to be getting worse. She was skipping school, staying out all night, and coming home with strange friends. Lily's parents were at a loss as to what to do. One day, Lily came home from school to find her mother in tears. "What's wrong?" Lily asked, concerned. "It's Samantha," her mother replied. "She's been acting really strange lately. We don't know what to do." Lily felt a shiver run down her spine. She had never seen her mother cry before. "What kind of strange?" she asked. "She's been talking to herself, and she's become really aggressive. We're worried about her," her mother said, wiping away tears. Lily didn't know what to do, but she knew she had to help her family. She decided to talk to Samantha and see if she could get her to open up. That evening, Lily knocked on Samantha's door. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Sure," Samantha replied, sounding irritated. Lily walked in and sat down on Samantha's bed. "What's going on with you?" she asked. "Nothing," Samantha said, avoiding eye contact. "Liar," Lily said, her voice cracking. "Mom is really worried about you." Samantha sighed. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she said, tears in her eyes. "I feel like something is taking over me." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I don't know," Samantha said, shaking her head. "I just feel like I'm not in control of myself anymore." Lily didn't know what to say, but she knew she had to do something. She decided to talk to her parents and suggest they see a pastor. Chapter 2: The Pastor's Visit. Lily's parents were hesitant to bring in a pastor, but they were desperate for help. They called up a local pastor, Reverend Michaels, and arranged for him to come over and speak with Samantha. The day of the pastor's visit, Lily could feel the tension in the air. Samantha was in her room, refusing to come out, and her parents were anxiously waiting for Reverend Michaels to arrive. When he finally arrived, he greeted the family warmly and sat down with them in the living room. "Tell me what's been going on," he said. Lily's parents explained the situation, and Reverend Michaels listened intently. "I believe that Samantha is under the influence of an evil spirit," he said after a moment of thought. "But I'm here to help. We can pray together and ask for God's help in casting out the spirit." Lily's parents looked skeptical, but they were willing to try anything at this point. They all held hands and Reverend Michaels led them in a prayer. Samantha came out of her room and joined them, looking scared and vulnerable. As they prayed, Samantha began to convulse, her body shaking uncontrollably. Lily watched in horror as her sister's eyes rolled back in her head and her voice changed, sounding deep and guttural. "Lily," the voice said, "I know what you're thinking. You're scared. But don't be. I'm here to help." Lily didn't know what to think. She was scared, but she was also curious. Was this really her sister talking, or was it something else? Chapter 3: Strange occurrences. After the pastor's visit, things seemed to calm down for a few days. Samantha appeared to be her old self again, and Lily's parents were relieved. But then, strange occurrences started happening in the house. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close by themselves, and strange noises could be heard at night. Lily tried to ignore it, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She confided in her best friend, Rachel, and together they started investigating. One night, they heard a strange noise coming from Samantha's room. They cautiously opened the door and saw Samantha sitting on her bed, staring at the wall. "Samantha," Lily whispered. Samantha turned to them, her eyes dark and unfocused. "Leave me alone," she growled. Lily and Rachel backed out of the room, scared out of their minds. What was happening to her sister? The next day, Lily's parents called in a documentary TV crew to film what was happening in their home. The crew set up cameras all over the house, hoping to capture any evidence of paranormal activity. That night, Lily was lying in bed, trying to sleep when she heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. She got up and went to investigate, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Samantha was standing in the hallway, her eyes glowing in the dark. "Lily," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You shouldn't have brought them here." Chapter 4: The Documentary Crew. The documentary crew had set up cameras all over the house, hoping to capture some evidence of paranormal activity. They spent the night monitoring the cameras, hoping to catch something on film. The next morning, they reviewed the footage and were shocked at what they saw. Objects moving on their own, doors opening and closing, and strange noises could all be heard on the recordings. The documentary crew was excited to have captured such compelling footage, but Lily's parents were terrified. They didn't know what to do or how to help their daughter. The crew stayed on for a few more days, hoping to capture even more evidence. But things took a turn for the worse when Samantha's behavior became even more erratic. One night, the crew was filming in Samantha's room when she suddenly attacked one of the crew members. She scratched him and bit him, and he had to be taken to the hospital for treatment. Lily's parents were beside themselves with worry. They didn't know how to help their daughter, and they were starting to believe that they were in over their heads. The next day, they decided to call in a specialist. They contacted a renowned exorcist, Father Gabriel, and arranged for him to come over and perform an exorcism on Samantha. But Lily couldn't help feeling like things were only going to get worse from here. Chapter 5: Father Gabriel. Father Gabriel arrived at the Smith's house in the late afternoon. He was a tall man with a stern look on his face, and he carried with him a large leather-bound book. Lily's parents welcomed him warmly and led him to Samantha's room. They explained the situation to him, and Father Gabriel listened patiently. "I see," he said after a moment of thought. "I will need to speak with Samantha alone. Please wait outside." Lily's parents looked worried but nodded and stepped outside, closing the door behind them. Lily sat on the floor outside of Samantha's room, trying to hear what was going on inside. She could hear Father Gabriel speaking in a low, authoritative voice. He was asking Samantha questions, and she could hear her sister's muffled responses. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and Lily jumped in fright. She heard shouting coming from inside the room, and then everything went quiet. A few moments later, Father Gabriel opened the door and stepped out. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "What happened?" Lily's parents asked, rushing over to him. Father Gabriel took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," he said. "But Samantha is not possessed by a demon. She has a severe case of schizophrenia." Lily's parents looked shocked. "Schizophrenia," they repeated. Father Gabriel nodded. "Yes. I'm afraid that exorcism won't help her. She needs medical attention." Lily felt a wave of relief wash over her. At least they knew what was wrong with her sister now. But she couldn't help feeling like they were still in the middle of a nightmare. Chapter 6: A New Diagnosis. Lily's parents were both in shock after hearing Father Gabriel's diagnosis. They had never considered that Samantha could have a mental illness like schizophrenia. They had always assumed that her behavior was the result of something supernatural. Father Gabriel suggested that they take Samantha to a hospital for a proper diagnosis and treatment. Lily's parents agreed, and they made arrangements to take Samantha to a nearby psychiatric hospital the next day. Lily felt a sense of relief that they were finally taking action to help her sister, but she was also worried about what would happen next. She had heard of schizophrenia before, but she didn't really understand what it was. She turned to the internet and started researching the condition. She read about the symptoms and the different types of treatments that were available. She learned that schizophrenia was a chronic condition that required ongoing treatment and support. As she read more and more, Lily began to understand what her sister was going through. She realized that Samantha had been struggling with this for a long time, and she felt guilty for not realizing it sooner. The next day, they took Samantha to the hospital, and she was admitted for observation and treatment. Lily's parents stayed with her, and Lily went back home feeling lost and alone. She knew that this was only the beginning of a long journey, but she was determined to do everything she could to help her sister. Chapter 7: A Visitor in the Night. That night, Lily had trouble sleeping. She couldn't stop thinking about Samantha and the diagnosis of schizophrenia. She felt guilty for not realizing that her sister was struggling with a mental illness, and she worried about what the future would hold for her family. As she lay in bed, she heard a noise coming from outside her window. She sat up and listened, trying to figure out what it was. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but then she heard a tapping sound. She got out of bed and cautiously approached the window. She pulled back the curtain and peered out into the darkness. At first, she couldn't see anything, but then she saw a figure standing in the shadows. Lily's heart raced as she tried to make out who it was. She couldn't see their face, but she could tell that it was a man. "Who are you?" she called out. The figure didn't respond, but Lily could see that he was holding something in his hand. It looked like a small box. Lily felt a wave of fear wash over her. She didn't know what to do. She didn't want to wake her parents and cause a panic, but she also didn't want to stay alone with this stranger outside her window. She took a deep breath and decided to take action. She quickly grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, the police arrived and searched the area, but they found no sign of the mysterious stranger. Lily felt relieved that the police had come, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She didn't know who the stranger was or what he wanted, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow connected to Samantha's condition. Chapter 8: A documentary crew arrives. The next day, Lily's parents received a phone call from a documentary film crew. They had heard about Samantha's condition and were interested in making a film about her story. At first, Lily's parents were hesitant. They didn't want to exploit their daughter's condition for the sake of a documentary. But the film crew assured them that their intention was to raise awareness about mental illness and to show the challenges that families face when dealing with a loved one's diagnosis. After some discussion, Lily's parents agreed to allow the film crew to come to their home and film Samantha's story. Lily was excited about the prospect of a film crew coming to her home. She had never been on camera before, and she thought it would be interesting to be a part of a documentary. The film crew arrived the next day, and Lily was immediately drawn to their cameras and equipment. She watched as they set up their cameras and microphones and began to film. At first, Samantha was hesitant to be on camera, but as the crew began to ask her questions, she opened up about her condition and how it had affected her life. Lily watched as the crew filmed Samantha's interview, and she was impressed by how professional they were. She began to see the potential for the film to help others who were going through similar struggles. As the day went on, the film crew continued to film, capturing intimate moments between Samantha and her family. They filmed Lily as she helped her mother prepare dinner, and they filmed Samantha as she played with her dog in the backyard. Lily felt like she was part of something important, and she hoped that the film would help people to understand what her family was going through. Chapter 9: Strange Occurrences. As the days went on, strange occurrences began to happen in the Smith household. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close without explanation, and Lily would hear strange whispers in the night. At first, Lily thought she was just imagining things, but then she noticed that her parents were also experiencing the same strange occurrences. They tried to ignore it, but the strange happenings became more frequent and intense. One night, Lily woke up to find Samantha standing at the foot of her bed, staring at her with empty eyes. Lily screamed, waking up her parents. They rushed into her room, but Samantha was nowhere to be found. Lily's parents were growing increasingly concerned about the safety of their family. They decided to bring in a paranormal investigator to try and figure out what was happening in their home. The investigator came to their home and conducted a thorough investigation. He took readings of the electromagnetic field in the house, and he set up cameras and recording equipment in various rooms. After several days of investigation, the paranormal investigator presented his findings to the Smith family. He told them that their home was haunted by a malevolent spirit, and that it was feeding off of Samantha's energy. The family was shocked by the revelation, but they were relieved to finally have an explanation for the strange occurrences in their home. The investigators suggested that they perform a cleansing ritual to rid their home of the malevolent spirit. Lily watched as her parents and the investigator performed the cleansing ritual. They burned sage and recited prayers, and as they did, Lily felt a sense of calm wash over her. As the ritual came to an end, Lily felt like a weight had been lifted off of her shoulders. She didn't know if the cleansing had worked, but she felt hopeful that things would return to normal. Chapter 10: A Sinister Turn. After the cleansing ritual, things seemed to return to normal in the Smith household. The strange occurrences stopped, and Samantha's behavior began to improve. But just as the family started to let their guard down, things took a sinister turn. One night, Lily woke up to the sound of screaming coming from Samantha's room. She rushed to her sister's room to find Samantha thrashing around on her bed, screaming incoherently. Lily's parents were already in the room, trying to calm Samantha down. But Samantha's behavior was unlike anything they had seen before. She was speaking in a strange language, and her eyes were rolled back in her head. Lily's parents tried to hold Samantha down, but she was too strong. She pushed them away and began to writhe on the bed. Lily felt a sense of dread wash over her as she watched her sister's behavior. She didn't know what was happening to Samantha, but she knew that it wasn't good. As Samantha continued to thrash around, Lily noticed something strange happening in the room. The air around them began to grow cold, and she could see her breath in front of her. Lily felt like she was in a nightmare. She wanted to help her sister, but she didn't know how. She could only stand there and watch as Samantha's behavior grew more and more erratic. Finally, after what felt like hours, Samantha collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Lily's parents rushed to her side, checking her pulse and breathing. Samantha was still alive, but just barely. Lily watched as her parents carried her out of the room, tears streaming down their faces. Lily didn't know what was happening to her family, but she knew that it was something beyond her understanding. Chapter 11: The Exorcism. After Samantha's violent outburst, the Smith family knew that they needed to take drastic measures to save their daughter. They turned to the church and sought the help of a priest who was known for performing exorcisms. The priest arrived at their home and began to perform the ritual. The family gathered in Samantha's room as the priest recited prayers and sprinkled holy water around the room. Lily watched as her sister writhed on the bed, her body contorted in unnatural ways. She could hear the priest shouting at the demon, demanding that it leave Samantha's body. But the demon refused to leave. It fought back against the priest, causing the room to shake and objects to fly off the shelves. Lily watched in horror as the scene unfolded before her. She didn't know if they would be able to save Samantha. Finally, after what felt like hours, the demon was exorcised from Samantha's body. Lily watched as her sister's body relaxed, the demon gone from her. Samantha was still alive, but she was weak and exhausted. The family huddled around her, relieved that she was finally free from the demon's grasp. As the priest left their home, he warned the family that the demon may return. They needed to stay vigilant and continue to pray for Samantha's safety. Lily watched as her family gathered around Samantha, relieved and thankful that she was still with them. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that they would face it together. Chapter 12: The Aftermath. After the exorcism, life for the Smith family slowly returned to normal. Samantha was weak but recovering, and the strange occurrences had ceased. But the family couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. They had been through a traumatic experience, and it had left its mark on them. Lily's parents sought therapy to help them cope with the trauma, and Lily found solace in her art. She spent hours painting, trying to make sense of what had happened to her family. But despite their efforts to move on, the family couldn't escape the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows. One night, Lily woke up to the sound of footsteps outside her bedroom door. She sat up, her heart racing as she listened to the footsteps approach her door. She called out to her parents, but there was no answer. The footsteps grew closer, and Lily could feel a sense of dread wash over her. Finally, the footsteps stopped outside her door. Lily held her breath, waiting for whatever was on the other side of the door to reveal itself. But nothing happened. The footsteps receded, and Lily was left alone in the silence of her room. She didn't know if it was her imagination or if there was still something in their home, but she knew that she couldn't ignore the feeling of unease. Chapter 13: The Investigation. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong in their home. She began to do some research on her own, trying to understand what had happened to her family. She discovered that their home had a dark history. Decades ago, a family had lived in the house, and the daughter had also exhibited strange and violent behavior. The family had eventually moved out, leaving the house abandoned for years. Lily dug deeper and found out that there had been rumors of a curse on the house. Some believed that the land the house was built on had been cursed by Native American spirits, causing anyone who lived there to suffer from demonic possession. Lily didn't know what to believe, but she knew that there was still something in their home. She convinced her parents to let her bring in a paranormal investigator to see if they could find any evidence of the supernatural. The investigator arrived at their home and immediately began to conduct an investigation. They set up cameras and recording devices, trying to capture any evidence of paranormal activity. Lily watched as the investigator went from room to room, searching for any signs of the supernatural. She held her breath as they entered Samantha's room, wondering if they would find anything. But to Lily's surprise, the investigator found nothing. There was no evidence of the supernatural in their home. Lily was left feeling confused and frustrated. She didn't know what to believe anymore. If there was no evidence of the supernatural, then what had happened to her family? Chapter 14: The Revelation. Days turned into weeks, and the Smith family tried to move on from their ordeal. But Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. One day, she was in her room when she heard a faint whisper. She couldn't make out what it was saying, but she knew that it was coming from inside her room. She searched her room, but found nothing out of the ordinary. But the whispering persisted, growing louder and more urgent. Finally, Lily followed the sound to her closet. She opened the door, and to her horror, she found Samantha huddled inside. "Samantha, what are you doing?" Lily asked, her voice shaking. Samantha looked up at her, her eyes filled with fear. "I can't control it, Lily," she said. "The demon, it's still inside of me." Lily's heart sank as she realized that the exorcism hadn't worked. Samantha was still possessed. But this time, Lily knew what to do. She contacted the same pastor who had performed the exorcism before, and he agreed to come back and try again. The pastor arrived at their home, and they gathered around Samantha's bed once more. The exorcism was long and grueling, but this time, it worked. Samantha was free of the demon's grip. As the family sat together, exhausted but relieved, Lily realized that the demon had never been in their home. It had been inside Samantha all along. Chapter 15: The Aftermath. The Smith family slowly began to heal in the aftermath of Samantha's possession. They went to family therapy to work through the trauma, and Samantha received ongoing mental health treatment. As time went on, Lily started to feel like their family could finally move on. But she still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their story. One day, she was going through old family photos when she found something that made her blood run cold. In the background of one photo, there was a figure lurking in the shadows. It was hard to make out any features, but Lily knew that it was not a member of their family. She showed the photo to her parents, and they were equally disturbed. They didn't remember anyone else being in the house at the time the photo was taken. Lily started to do some research, trying to find out who or what the figure in the photo could be. She discovered that there had been a string of disappearances in the area around the time they had moved into the house. People had gone missing, never to be found again. Lily couldn't help but wonder if the figure in the photo was somehow connected to the disappearances. She felt a sense of unease settle over her, knowing that they might never know the full story of what had happened in their home. Years went by, and Lily moved on with her life. But the memory of the figure in the photo haunted her, a reminder of the darkness that had once engulfed their family. Epilogue. Lily sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by her husband and children. It had been many years since the events that had rocked her family's world, but she still thought about them often. As she watched her children play, she couldn't help but wonder what their future held. She hoped that they would never have to face the kind of darkness that she had experienced in her own life. Suddenly, her phone beeped with a notification. She picked it up and saw that it was a message from an unknown number. "Did you ever find out what really happened?" Lily's heart raced as she stared at the message, unsure of what to do. But then, she made a decision. She typed out a response. "No, I never did. But I'm at peace with that now. I've moved on with my life." She hit send, feeling a sense of closure wash over her. Whatever had happened all those years ago, she knew that she had done everything in her power to uncover the truth. And sometimes, that was enough. The end.